The Green Party have won. Bad night for Labour in the Gorton and Denton by-election. Is immigration too high? And should university debate societies ban certain groups from coming on? There's lots to talk about, so let's get political. Hello and welcome to Let's Get Political on Quays TV, a student political show where we discuss all the big things happening in British politics. I'd like to welcome our two returning guests, Charlie Waler and Kireev. Fourth time now, Charlie, isn't it? You've been on it quite a lot.
Yeah, I just keep coming back.
Yeah.
Not got much of a social life, so here I am again.
And I'm your host, Matthew Hargreaves. So we have three topics and we will start with the by-election. So the Green Party's Hannah Spencer has won the Gorton and Denton by-election, becoming its first candidate to win a Westminster by-election. Spencer won 14.9 thousand votes, making up nearly 41% of the votes cast. Reform came second with 10,500, while Labour came third with 9.3 thousand. In her victory speech, Spencer vowed to fight for working people while calling out divisive figures who she said scapegoat others. Thoughts on the Greens winning? Did you expect it, Charlie?
To be fair, I feel like a lot of the media coverage I saw implied that Green was going to win, but I just didn't want to, get my hopes up in a way, because all day yesterday I was kind of looking at the polls and it was 1% between Labour, Labour, Reform and Green. Definitely not Conservative.
Yeah,
I think they got less than 1,000 votes.
I don't think they got their deposit back because they didn't get enough votes.
But I mean, I think I'm excited that Green won, not necessarily because I want a Green representative in that area, but because I think it paints such a bigger picture when it comes to the voting system and the two-party system. The fact it was like a three-horse race throughout the by-election is something that we've not really seen before, especially one of the minor parties out of that three-horse race winning. And it kind of proves that all of this fear-mongering we've kind of been told for decades about how you shouldn't vote for Green or Lib Dem or whoever because it's a wasted vote if you don't vote for either Labour or Conservative. It proves that it's not the case in every situation. It proves that protest voting can actually work. While I don't think the protest vote was the reason why they won, I think that Green's campaign was the most effective out of all of them. And at the end of the day, that is why they won. And, people are sick of Labour. I think that this being the first kind of Green protest vote to win that I can think of in this kind of post-reform era we're in politics, where minor parties are kind of getting more popular. The fact that it was Gorton and Denton, which has been Labour for about a century, is shocking.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Because they had a 13,000 majority from the 2024 result. That's now been wiped out. So, Roman, how bad is this for Labour?
Well, I think this is very bad, and particularly because I'm pretty sure most people would agree that if they did let Burnham be the candidate, then they would have won. Do you think that as well, then, if he had stood, Labour would have won? It'd be a very different result. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Burnham is very popular in Manchester, and I do understand why they made this decision in a sense, because I don't want to get too cynical about, it's because Starmer doesn't want a leadership challenge from Burnham and that's the only reason why. It does make sense that they want a Labour mayor who does improve the kind of reputation of the party better maybe than an MP would, because there's only so much you can do as an MP, whereas as a mayor you have more greater powers, greater influence. And for people who might, for example, be considering leaving Labour, or people who are not Labour supporters now who might switch to Labour at some point later, they could be swayed by people like Burnham who have regional, local power. So I understand why they, did what they did. But in terms of, as you said, a seat that was held for a century by a party now being taken, not even by its rival, but by a new, not a new party, it's been around for a long time, but a newly populist party, because its ideology changed a lot under Polanski, and it's we could debate even the extent to which it is a Green party necessarily, to the same way like the German Greens are, for example.
Because Labour often said that reform are their biggest threat. But is it now the Greens? Because obviously Labour and Reform are not the same. So are Greens now the threat to Labour?
I mean, given these results, that is my opinion. I definitely think Green is a bigger threat to Labour. I think now, like I said, this being their first by-election won against Labour in this kind of era is such a bad look for Labour. You can't even make it up. And I definitely think that like Reform, there are people who are going to vote Reform no matter what you say to them. But I think so many Labour like veteran voters, I feel like some of them can be swayed to Green because the current Labour government isn't really the Labour that most people have in mind, and they're not really the Labour people are voting for. I think a lot of loyal Labour voters are probably quite traditional, working class, kind of trade unionists, and that's not the kind of policies we've been seeing from Keir Starmer's government. And so I think the only kind of speed bump Green has to get over is this idea that they're a wasted vote. And hopefully this result, proves that's not the case.
Do you still think that Reform did well, Roman? Because this is a very diverse area. Gorton and Denton got a very young set of people in it as well. So Reform, nearly a Labour seat, obviously, for nearly 100 years. So when you look at that, you think Reform had no chance, but it still did pretty well.
No, that is true, and it's like with the Kireev election, was a by-election, I think, also in Wales, where they were in second, I think, and they didn't. Well, obviously that means they didn't win, but still, that for a new populist party to in Wales, which is very like Labour / play for Reform to be second is still, certainly a notable achievement. I was surprised by the results. Not so much by the Greens winning necessarily, but that they won by such a huge majority.
Like 4,000, wasn't it? 4,000 majority, I believe.
And because I saw a poll, and there, we had the podcast some time ago where I said that I think the Reform would win because based on a poll I saw at that time, it looked as though they would because they had a very, I can't remember what it was now, but like a very big, not a 1%, but a significant lead over Greens and Labour. And the Greens were second at the time, whereas a poll I saw recently was like Greens, Reform and Labour like neck to neck, literally like 1%, as you said, like a 1% difference. So even to get more votes than Labour in a constituency that was for Labour for a century, even if you don't win, is still, a significant achievement. And, not that I'm particularly happy about that because, I'm not a fan of populist parties, either the Greens or Reform. And the fact that the parties that got the most votes in this by-election are the two populist parties is concerning, I think.
But can you blame people for turning to these because of what Labour and Conservatives have done over the last couple of decades? No, I don't want any points. I don't want to blame any people for making any decisions at all. And I do understand what you mean that people felt kind of betrayed by the main parties or not represented by the main parties. That's why they turned to new alternatives. But I do want to slightly disagree with what you said about the significance of the Green victory, because it's like with that coverage of Mamdani's victory in New York that was hailed as this, like socialism's coming to America, but New York, as Shapiro correctly said, New York is like 150% Democrat. Oh. So it's more about he won the nomination, that's the or what you call it, the nomination. I forgot how it's called, but that he won that thing. That is, I think, a more significant achievement that he won the election because. Well, why would a Democrat not win that election? So same thing here. I feel like many people are disenchanted with Labour and they turn to the Greens, but it's in that area for Reform to win, it's an urban area. Urban areas historically were very kind of Labour / progressive, and it's the same in all countries. So I think it's maybe less impressive than if they ousted a Conservative in the southeast if the Greens won, for example.
Oh yeah, I think it's most significant Greens won because it was between Greens and Reform. I completely understand what you're saying, like it is a more left-wing area and that doesn't make sense. But also we've seen a lot of left-wing areas go towards Reform. A lot of left-wing people go towards Reform. I think it's not so much left versus right in this kind of instance. I think it's more the fact that it's a working class area, and Reform noticeably have picked up a lot of working class votes, given, because of the way that they campaign and because of the way that they go about making their policies. A lot of working class people tend to vote for them. And I think that's what makes it. I think it would still be extremely significant if Reform did win. And the fact that they got so close to winning as well in a constituency that was Labour for 100 years is insane. And to me, it's even more crazy that they got so close to, not so close to winning, but, second place with a Londoner in a Manchester or a Greater Manchester constituency, which I thought was really interesting. That makes me think, what do you think the results would have been if they had managed to find a Gorton and Denton local for Reform? I wonder if they would have won or it wouldn't have been such a big majority, because I think Northerners, rightfully so, are very proud, and especially Manchester, it's a very proud area, and I can't really think of a worse candidate for a Manchester by-election than a Londoner.
Yeah. Well, we got one more question and we'll move on to the next topic. The turnout was, you said 47%.
I think so, yeah, around that.
That's very, very poor. Why, Roman? Why was the turnout so low, do you reckon? It's not just in this election, it's in the 2024 general election saw the lowest turnout.
Well, you mentioned that it's a very kind of young, I think you mentioned that the population that is young, and young people's turnout is generally lower. So maybe that's why, but it could also be part of the more broader, like, I'm just guessing now, but it could be because of this broader kind of antipathy or apathy, even for people regarding politics, which is obviously not a healthy thing for a democracy, and we might come back to it while discussing the other topics.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the question again? My mind went
about the turnout.
Turnout, yeah,
was really poor.
I think when it comes to voter turnout, there's not really any way of getting a correct answer, because the people that caused the low voter turnout didn't vote, so we don't know why they didn't vote. I think it's a possibility that the people that didn't vote, maybe a majority of them are normally loyal to Labour, but they don't feel represented by the current Labour government. I think there's a very strong chance of that being the case. But like you said, low voter turnout is a very common theme, unfortunately, in local elections.
Yeah.
And I don't really think there's any way of fixing it other than mandatory voting, which is a whole other debate. But I think if I had to guess or bet on it, it would probably be that, considering how long it's been a Labour constituency for, the majority of people there didn't vote because they would vote for Labour but didn't feel represented. It's also a very working class area. Working class people are less likely to vote because they don't feel represented by certain parties.
Okay, well, very interesting. So let's move on to our next topic, which is about immigration, a very hot topic. So Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who's the co-owner of Manchester United, recently made some big claims which have been fact-checked and were incorrect. The main one was the population of the UK was 58 million in 2020. Now it's 70 million. That's 12 million people. That's wrong. So it's a topic which causes many arguments. The last thing you need, Charlie, is someone with quite a big voice spreading misinformation. Do you think there's an issue with spreading misinformation from big, well-known people on social media?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think this also, not only is there misinformation, I think one big issue we're seeing is that a lot of people who are speaking out against immigration, or the people that are getting a platform speaking out about immigration, tend to be on the hard right, and it kind of pushes this idea that anyone who thinks immigration is too high is right-wing, which is, I don't think immigration is a right-wing or left-wing issue whatsoever. I think there are a few things other than economics, really, that are left versus right. It normally comes up to personal morals and personal opinion, personal experiences. I think that also we've seen so much miscommunication, whether it's from famous people or from, just the random famous TikTok video from one person, which is also concerning, that anyone can have if you use the right hashtags, any TikTok video can go viral if you say anything. And unless you're accredited journalist, there's not really any repercussions for that. there's so much misinformation about how many people are coming over here illegally compared to legally, and how much money we're spending on them, and how many people are slipping through the system and we're not noticing. And it's such a big issue, but it's so hard to police, especially considering...
Well, I did want to go through some definitions because it can get a little bit complicated. So I'll briefly go over these. A migrant is anyone who moves from one area to another. That can be temporary or permanent between different countries within the same country. An immigrant is someone who has permanently moved to another country. Obviously, illegal immigrants are those who enter the country with permission, whereas illegal immigrants arrived without it. Some illegal immigrants will then make claims for asylum once they've arrived, and then an asylum seeker is someone asking for sanctuary due to dangers in their home country. Roman, I want to ask you, is it, obviously Charlie touched upon it, is it branded, it seems to be far right to care about immigration? What do you think about this?
Well, obviously I kind of reject Reform's position that like all non-essential immigration should be frozen, because I think it would be impossible to define precisely what essential means. And obviously, like as an international student, I believe that every country, every culture, nation, whatever you want to call it, benefits from absorbing some elements of a different culture, as long as, this is the important bit, that the absorption thing happens. Because, and I do think that, yes, it's not, fair to, let's say, to kind of label anyone who criticizes immigration, even for like non-economic reasons, as far right, because first of all, that dilutes the term to the point where like every person is far right, because like it's undeniable that most people in Britain do think that immigration is too high.
Do you think it's too high?
I think it's the like number one thing is that it's mismanaged. Because I feel like the important bit about immigration, this is like a common sense position I think that most people can agree with, is that there needs to be proper integration. And there hasn't been, I think, proper integration in Britain with immigrants, legal or illegal. And this is you can see that from evidence all around the country. You have segregated places like Blackburn, or with Gorton and Denton, it's not necessarily segregated, but still, it has, 30% Muslim population. And you had, the Greens making leaflets in Urdu, infamously, which just shows you how widespread the kind of how high the scale of it is. In Tower Hamlets, you had recently a councillor who was campaigning running to be an MP in Bangladesh whilst being a councillor in Tower Hamlets, which is this kind of dual loyalty obviously shouldn't happen. In the same borough, you also had a charity run that explicitly excluded girls or women in its description, which is rather sexist in my opinion. And that area is like the most Muslim area in the UK.
So you think we have more of a problem with integration than immigration? There's no problem with immigration; it's just the people that are coming are not integrating.
I think so, because I'm opposed to all kind of forms of nationalism or like ethnic nationalism. I don't think that people's DNA matters with regards to their behavior in society. What matters is what culture they adopt. And this doesn't mean, but when I say adopt a culture, that doesn't mean that you kind of lose and sever any ties with your country of origin. Of course not. Like you can still, enjoy the kind of things and then identify with the things you absorbed in your home culture. But with regards to respect for the law and the values and whatever, we could talk about like the specifics of this, because these terms are hard to define in many cases.
Yeah.
But as far as like integrating in that sense goes, yeah, it's absolutely vital. But also what I said about like the segregation thing, that this is not as much about maybe just the immigrants, although it's obviously a part of it, that this integration should be, if you will, promoted by ensuring that you don't have ghettos forming, essentially. And people do want to live next to people who are from the same country, which is a natural desire, but it shouldn't take priority over integration, I think. I didn't come here as an immigrant to live in a majority Russian area of Manchester, to elect a Russian MP who would then represent Russia, like interest of Russian people of this area, as opposed to and be loyal to Russia at the same time, as opposed to being loyal to to Britain. So yeah, integration is, I think, the number one thing to address here.
Okay. Charles, I'm going to ask you, which party do you think could achieve that? I mean, Conservatives have been trying and they've failed massively.
Can I say none?
None, yeah, that's fine. An obvious one is reform.
Yeah,
okay.
No, definitely reform. But also, this is something I hate saying out loud because I've always kind of wanted to be able to support minor parties no matter what position they take. But you still have to argue, we've not seen reform really act in massive power. We've not seen the Greens act in massive power. We've only ever seen Conservative and Labour, and they've both let us down. And it's very easy to think that these new minor parties, just because they're not Conservative and Labour, they won't let us down. But you have to remember they are also, if Greens or Reform did get into Parliament, it's the same Parliament structure that Labour and Conservative have been using for centuries or decades. And so I really don't want to get my hopes up about any. I don't agree with Reform's immigration policies, but I do think it's too high. I think there are too many illegal immigrants coming over. I'm not saying that in a Britain for the British kind of way. Like I said, you don't have to be right-wing to disagree with immigration. My view on immigration is that, especially illegally, it really negatively impacts workers' wages. So I've seen this first-hand work experience. You've got a lot of people coming over who either don't speak English very well, so they don't know their rights very well, or they come from economically struggling countries. They then take up jobs in the UK that are in awful working conditions. They don't pay minimum wage, and they kind of accept this. And then it normalises these, what we've all seen, like dodgy cash-in-hand jobs at takeaways and corner shops and nail salons. And then you've got especially young people or people who are just coming off of benefits or people who are looking for entry-level jobs. They accept these horrible working conditions because it's become the norm. And if legal immigration is low, which is, I guess, this kind of whole stealing our jobs argument in a way. If legal employment is low because immigrants are working illegally, then the government has no incentive to raise minimum wage as well. So it all around negatively impacts wages. And also, I mean, this whole stealing our jobs thing, do you really want to work in these dodgy cash-in-hand shops that don't pay minimum wage? I know I don't. I'm sure these immigrants don't. And with integration as well, I feel like a big part of people integrating is class, because you've got a lot of immigrants come over, they're very low income, they're working these jobs filled with other illegal immigrants who obviously aren't making a lot of money, and they're stuck in these low income, almost all immigrant communities. And I feel like those two work hand in hand. Yeah,
the Greens have sort of adopted to hit back at Reform, saying don't blame the immigrants, blame the rich.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah.
We do have to move on because we've not got long left. We could probably spend a whole show speaking about immigration. Bangor University has distanced itself from a decision by its Student Debating Society to refuse a question and answer session with Reform UK. The society said it rejected a request by Reform MP Sarah Potchin and campaigner Jack Anderton to address students citing zero tolerance for any forms of racism, transphobia or homophobia displayed by members of Reform UK. Now, we have spoke about Sarah Potchin before on this show, where she did make some comments on the cusp of kind of like too many black, brown and Asian faces in adverts. Bangor University said societies were run by the Students' Union and it welcomed debate across the political spectrum. So the union at Bangor said it was made by the society and they remain politically neutral. So I guess the obvious question to ask, Roman, is how can you have a debate society if you don't allow opposition on?
Well, I do agree with the piece about this in The Guardian, which said that freedom of speech does not mean you have to platform everyone who asks you. But at the same time, I do believe that if you do not debate people whose views you think are harmful, you achieve the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. I mean, the easiest or the simplest example to use here is that of Holocaust denial. You have Holocaust denial laws in some countries, but the problem is, and in principle, it should kind of stop the spread of Holocaust denial. But what actually happens is that in countries where these laws don't exist, like in America, you have the Holocaust deniers using that as an argument to say, see, you can deny like that the French Revolution happened and you won't be put in jail. But if you deny the Holocaust happened, you will be. Therefore, the Holocaust didn't happen. Therefore, it's all like this Jewish lobby controlling everything, like all of that argument. So effectively, you're fueling their support base by doing that. And this is what we saw in this case already. On GB News, you had the presenter talking about this Bangor University situation, she said in a very kind of succinct way, like, this sounds like an SNL skit and not a real like event that a debate society refuses to debate, which I think is a slightly like maybe unfair way to frame it, because refuse to debate versus like not platform someone is, well, I don't think it's quite the same thing. But it's definitely, if these ideas are so easy to prove that, that they're wrong and harmful and evil, do debate them and do engage with them. As and Widdicombe said in Oxford Union when they were debating free speech, that I would gladly debate a Holocaust denier. Let's talk about this. And when you don't do that and you do the opposite, which is what the university society did, I think you will harm the cause you are advancing.
Because this is also a university. This is where young people come to learn, and I think that's when you debate most, when you're growing up and stuff.
Oh, yeah. I think it's also important to note that people in university are probably voting for the first time. And it is so important to not set a biased precedent from the start of that voting age. I agree with what you said about how you need to, if you want to defeat certain views, you need to debate them. Debating is like, free speech and debating is one of the most fundamental parts of this democracy. It's amazing you can get on TV, you can get on camera and say you don't like the Prime Minister. That is one of the best things about this country, and that's how democracy works. And I think when I'm just thinking about this from, the fact it was a student-led society banning, I don't think it's that deep, I'm going to be honest. It's, but it raises a much bigger question about free speech in general. I don't think that Reform has much to worry about not being allowed to speak in a student union debate. They've got bigger fish to fry.
Well, they were going to get Sarah Potchin on. I mean, I'd like to have Andy Burnham on here, but he keeps saying no.
That would be great.
If you're watching, Andy, come on.
Yeah, come on. We know that you're not governing Gorton and Denton now. So
yeah.
What else could you be doing?
So, do you think it is a dent in free speech? I know it's only a small little society, but it's made news and it is an interesting topic.
I think that it is an example of a dent in democracy. I think that what we've seen so much of, and it's almost like a joke, is Reform is going around as a party filled with a lot of upper class, mostly white, mostly male representatives. They're going around saying, we're being silenced, you can't say anything more, the right wing's being silenced. Same thing is happening in America with the Republicans, really. And they're going around saying this, and the more that the left prove that point and don't let them speak in debates, the more they're kind of handing Reform this sympathy vote on a silver platter, because Reform is targeting working class people by saying, I know what it's like to be silenced. I'm not being funny. You make up less than 1% of the House of Commons and made up 25% of BBC News at 10? They don't know what it's like to be silenced. But the longer they keep saying it and keep screaming it from rooftops, the more that people are going to believe it. And the left should not be giving in to this weird narrative that they're spinning, because it's just giving them more and more votes.
Yeah, okay. Well, that is the end of the show. It's gone quick, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I'd like to say a massive thank you to our two guests in appearing, and thank you very much for watching. We will see you soon. Goodbye.